Hello, this is I Go Travel with Don Barnett. We are headed down south on Highway 95 in Arizona on the way toward Yuma. And we're going to stop in at Parker and the Quartzsite and overnight in the Kofa Mountains. So we've got a lot to show you and a lot to tell you. So come along, let's roll. In the last video, we talked about Havasu City and the nice big balloon festival there. The thing in this video, we're going to look at a couple of more communities. Parker, where the dam was built on the river, and Quartzsite. Both are great meccas and havens for snowbirders in the wintertime. And then we'll leave Quartzsite in this video and stop in at the Kofa Mountains and overnight a couple of nights. The next stop heading south is Parker, and it is downstream from Lake Havasu, where the dam was built here across the Colorado River. It is quite rocky and quite picturesque in this area. A lot of tourists and snowbirds like this area, and almost every available spot is taken up with buildings, mobile homes, and RVs. There's also a couple of classy state parks along the river here. We are on Highway 95 in the Parker area, and you can see it is quite rocky, rugged country. We are coming into the main part of Parker itself, but it's an area that's strung out along the river. The best place to build a dam is where a river narrows down. And these areas are often rocky, mountainous terrain like what you've got here. You've probably heard me say before that I made several other travelogue videos of the communities along the Colorado River. And you can find them on my website in the travelogue section and under A for Arizona. And our next town is Q for Quartzsite. Quartzsite usually has a population of only a few hundred, but every January and February, its population explodes with thousands of snowbirders and RVers. And the streets around the town are jammed bumper to bumper like this one. I'll tell you more about things in Quartzsite, but let's take a short bike ride on the desert trails around the community. It is fairly flat around Quartzsite, and we hang out on the Bureau of Land Management desert lands. But even the roads are pretty rough and rocky, but we really enjoy following the roads and the trails. It's not all downhill, it's a bit uphill at times too. Here are some quads going out to run the desert. They go in groups quite often because you can be a long ways out there with those engines, and if you happen to break down, it wouldn't be too good. So you go usually with people. You can see where people park just anywhere and everywhere on the desert here. But it's a lot of fun, and people really enjoy their machines. And that was the last we saw of those guys. They were headed out across the desert. The story of Quartzsite can be told in the name changes the place has experienced. It was initially called Fort Tyson because miner and entrepreneur Charles Tyson built his own private fort to protect miners and settlers from Indian threat and attack. The Apache people opposed the arrival of white people who were taking over both the water and the land. After the U.S. military removed the Apache threat, the place grew as a stagecoach stop and became known as Tyson Wells because of the good water supply there. Eventually, the mining boom declined. The famous Butterfield stagecoach line was abandoned. The community was abandoned. Several years later, a minor mining boom occurred. The U.S. postal regulations said a community, once shut down, could not revive the same postal address. And the old one was, of course, called Tyson Wells. Therefore, the new name of Tyson Wells was replaced by the new name of Quartzite because of the interest in minerals in the area. In midwinter, the snowbirds come, and there is everything to look at and buy. This is the biggest of hundreds of tents, blocks of tents, all loaded with all kinds of merchandise. There is, of course, all kinds of food to eat. Quartzite started as a mineral and rock show, but it has expanded to everything from trinkets, souvenirs, RV parts, and sales, clothing, and almost everything imaginable, including these metal detectors. When you come into town, this sign with camels greets you. What are camels doing in a town away out here in the American desert? Well, there is a story here. Before the American Civil War, the U.S. Army became interested in the idea of camels replacing horses and mules in their military operations. We're looking at a National Historic Cemetery in Quartzsite. The Army ran tests between camels and horses and mules. The camels outperformed the horses and mules in almost everything. They lasted far longer on less water. They carried nearly double the weight of horses and mules, and it took them less than half the time to carry their load over long distances. The camels even swam small rivers with heavier loads, while horses and mules floundered and sometimes even drowned. So then, why didn't camels replace horses and mules in the American West? Well, basically, the cowboy and the soldier could not adjust to the camel. The camel's smell often upset the horses and mules, making the horses and mules hesitant and wary whenever a camel came near. Most important, the camel was a temperamental animal. Unlike horses and mules who could be bossed around, camels became quickly agitated if mistreated and reacted uncontrollably. They would kick, bite, and stomp. Cowboy or soldier, it made no difference. You have heard about the phrase, the straw that broke the camel's back. Well, this is what did it. Now, camels chewed their cud like a cow and would spit gobs of mucus, lumps, fresh from their stomachs, at the nearest person. The cowboy and soldier just couldn't handle it. Then the Civil War broke out. The camel was forgotten, left behind in the attention to guns and artillery and war as the country struggled against itself. The poor camel was forgotten, turned loose to fend for itself in a hostile and non-supporting environment. And one of the camel drivers was a fella named High Jolly. And High Jolly lived and died at Quartzsite. Quartzsite is also the home of the original male stripper. He was a bookstore seller who lived much of his life here at Quartzsite. I've gone out to his bookstore just on the outskirts of town, and the place was crowded. And some were there for curiosity, others were a bit offended, and others, particularly the ladies, were lined up to have their photographs taken with this guy. Let's go for a little ride out on the flat desert lands. It's nice, smooth riding, but you're at always some danger. Your front tire can hit one of those rocks and flip you sideways to a sudden stop. There's a few more trees and vegetation in this section. We're coming up into the place where a lot of us boondock and park, and you'll be able to see some of the rigs as they're scattered anywhere and everywhere. People like this kind of camping because there's no rules thrown at you every time you turn around. I often say that there's an inverse ratio between what you pay and the quality of camping. It's free camping and the quality is great. There's somebody out for a morning walk. Nobody telling you what to do, and lots of space between you and the next camper. It is, for me, the best kind of campground. No services, no electricity, no sewer, so you have to run into town when you need those services. We finally headed south from Quartzsite toward Yuma. And over to the east is the Kofa Wildlife Refuge. And those gray mountains, a nice, quiet place to camp. As you can see, the word Kofa stands for the King of Arizona, the first big gold mine in the area in the pioneer days. Kofa in yellow, the K is for King, OF, of in the middle, and A for Arizona. And the shortened version, Kofa, is the name of the mountains and the wildlife preserve where we camped. The history involves mining and the military down here. They've used it as a testing area since the Second World War. And it's a wide open, desolate place, but the mountains rise sharply from the desert floor. We went up to a place called Palm Canyon, where a few palm trees are still surviving in the shade of the canyon. And we rode our bikes up into the canyon. And the thing about the desert, beautiful sunsets everywhere. This was the road that we took as we headed back into the back country near the mountains. A well-groomed road. You were not permitted to go off this road out onto the desert. It is a wildlife refuge area. But the road was a little washboardy at times, but not bad. There wasn't many people around, so we had no trouble finding a pull-off spot beside the road to camp. Just look at the color of the mountains. They are a dark brown, gray color, and it was the mid-afternoon when we were driving here. The sun was behind us. Well, we made camp, and an hour or so later, the sun started to set. Now, I don't have any filters on my cameras. What you see is what you get, is what I always say. But just look at the color of this mountain here as we drive toward it. And when the sun formed an hour later, look at the same color, same mountain, and look at the color change. From brown to a bright, bright red. Just a fantastic change. We made camp and then took our bicycles and rode them on further to the end of the road into that dark area there, which was a palm canyon where a few surviving palm trees had found shade and water, and they still were living, and hence the name Palm Canyon. This Ocatillo cactus is common in the desert. Often it looks only like a big brittle dry stick, but it really is a remarkable plant. In a drought, it will quickly drop its leaves and stop growing, but it will always flower and therefore produce seeds. Depending on how often it rains, the Ocotillo can go through its flowering and dropping flowers cycle up to 5 times in a season. It is a desert survivor. You can see how the Ocotillo is spelled in the lower right-hand corner of this photo. The L in the Spanish, in the language, is silent. So rather than saying Ocotillo, like the English would say, the Spanish correct pronunciation is Ocotillo. Hummingbirds love the red nectar from its flowers, and these little birds will adjust their migration patterns to coincide with the blooming red Ocotillo flowers. Hummingbirds are attracted to the red flowering Ocotillo, and that is why red is the best color for your hummingbird feeders. And hummingbirds, by the way, have a tremendous memory. If you start feeding them, they will come back and remember the location of your feeder year after year. Before we leave talking about plants, I'd like to tell you about an interesting plant. These creosote bushes are common on the desert floor. They emit a creosol smell after a rain. They were used commercially as a food preservative until the 1970s. Over the years, this plant has been used to cure and counteract numerous human ailments like stomach pains, general aches and pains, rheumatism, and various infections. They are very tough plants when it comes to survival in the desert. They are slow growers, but they will eventually crowd out other plants. The human practice of artificial fire suppression and cattle overgrazing has helped this creosote bush to take over the landscape from other plants. And by the way, I have made other videos on this snowbird country. If you look in the Arizona section, you look at Laughlin and Havasu City and Quartzsite, I have also got some other information on those places that I don't have in this video. Laughlin, for example, I tell you the story about the woman who battled the casinos for a place to live. And I got into a little personal trouble with the casino in the gambling hall business in Laughlin. And in one of those other videos, not part of this series, but Havasu City, we show you there the story of London Bridge and the student spring break and some of the things that go on there. And you'll see I also have some information on both Parker and Quartzsite in those videos that are not part of this 5 or 6 series here. So look around, click around Arizona on the website, and you'll find lots of information about this snowbird country. Okay, we should hit Yuma in the next video. If you liked what you saw, hit the subscribe button. That tells you when we're putting more videos up on the internet. And we've got more travels in mind. So join us. This is I Go Travel with Don Barnett.